come to the attention of this court that it may be that your attorneys would argue to the jury not to find you guilty of first-degree murder or second-degree murder, but to find you guilty of voluntary manslaughter. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
That the maximum penalty that you could receive for that, being a record level 1, meaning no record, with no aggravating circumstances, would be a 64-month minimum sentence to a 89-month maximum sentence. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Knowing that, have you talked to your attorneys about whether or not they could admit to the jury or request the jury find you guilty of the offense of voluntary manslaughter in this case?
I have.
And are you giving them permission to do so?
I am.
Has anyone forced you to make that or to give them that permission?
No.
Has anyone promised you anything to get you to make that admission?
No, sir.
Do you make this, or do you allow them or give them this permission of your own free will, fully understanding what you're doing?
I do.
Do you have any questions you want to ask me about that decision?
I don't.
And so you're making this decision to separate and apart from your lawyers and what you find to be in your best interest. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any questions you want to ask me about that decision?
No. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The court's going to find that the defendant willingly, understandingly, and knowingly is giving her attorneys permission to argue to the jury that they should find her guilty of voluntary manslaughter in this case. Anything further for the record for the state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything further for the record for the state?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Invite the jury. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, Judge.
We thank you for coming back and being with us today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, all the evidence in this case has been presented. And it's now time for the final arguments of the lawyers. At the conclusion of these arguments, I will instruct you on the law in this case, and then you'll be taken to the jury room to begin your deliberations. The final arguments of the lawyers are not evidence. They're given to assist you in evaluating the evidence. The lawyers are permitted in their final statements to argue, to characterize the evidence, and to attempt to persuade you to a particular verdict. It is improper for a lawyer in a final argument to become abusive. It is improper for a lawyer in a final argument to inject personal experiences. It is improper for a lawyer in a final argument to express a personal belief as to the truth or falsity of the evidence, or as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant. And it's improper for a lawyer to make arguments on the basis of matters outside of the record, except for matters concerning which this court may have taken judicial notice. I have taken judicial notice of nothing during this trial. A lawyer may, however, on the basis of the lawyer's analysis of the evidence, argue any position or conclusion with respect to a matter in issue. Now, If in the course of making a final argument to you, a lawyer attempts to restate part of the evidence, and what you remember the evidence to be is different from that of the lawyer, then it is your duty in recalling and remembering the evidence to be guided exclusively and solely by what you remember the evidence to be. Now, I'm going to instruct you in my charge that you will consider the following verdicts. I'm going to send in with you to the jury room this verdict sheet which contains your possible verdicts in this case. And in this case, you have 4 possible verdicts. And they are 1, guilty of first-degree murder. 2, guilty of second-degree murder. 3, guilty of voluntary manslaughter. 4, not guilty. Mr. Thompson is going to have the opportunity to talk to you first on behalf of Ms. Madonna. He told me that he might talk to you for as long as an hour and a half. However long he talks to you, we'll take our break after his argument to you. And Ms. Chandler's going to have the opportunity to talk to you. She told me she might talk to you for as long as an hour. After they've made their arguments to you, it's my turn. Please now give your attention to any remarks made to you on behalf of Ms. Madonna by Mr. Thomas. The jury is with the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor, and I'll be using the screen.
It's powering up.
Good morning. Good morning. Time travel is the best superpower you could have. Talk a lot about it, debate it, but time travel is the one. A lot of people want to be Superman and be impervious, be able to fly, super speed, super strong, stuff like that. But people are always coming after you, you always have to save someone, you don't have any time for yourself. Some people want to read everyone's mind. And that's just creepy. Time travel is the best superpower because you could go back in time and see everything that you read about in history books. You can go back in time and say, hey, maybe you should be a computer engineering major as opposed to sociology or criminal justice. Time travel would be the best superpower for Miss Madonna right now, too. If Joanna Madonna had the power of time travel, she wouldn't go back and stop what happened to her. She wouldn't go back and stop from being molested. She wouldn't go back and stop and tell herself no when she took her first drink of alcohol at the age of 14. And she wouldn't stop anything. It wouldn't stop from having Isabel, wouldn't stop from having Rachel, wouldn't stop from having Michelle, wouldn't stop from Meredith. If Miss Madonna could go back in time and go back to June 15th of 2013, that's where she would go. And the point of time that she would go back to is the point in time where her daughter Rachel told her to pick up the phone and call the cops. Because that's where everything turned. That's where her destiny turned. And that's why we're here today. Think about it for a second. If Miss Madonna had done that one simple thing, would any of us even be here right now? Because everything that she says matches up to what happened. Everything she says matches up to the physical evidence. So she just told the cops that Jose Perez attacked me and I had to defend myself, we wouldn't even be here. Why do we talk so much about Joanna Madonna's story? Now, in any other setting, talking about Ms. Madonna, talking about her overcoming her molestation, her rapes, that would be something that people say, that is awesome, Ms. Madonna. You are a huge credit to yourself. You've overcome all this, and you've now taken a job and taken a career at the most underappreciated, underpaid job that you can have as a public school teacher. Usually that is a credit. And the state wants to sit here and harp on, well, look what you did before. You're an alcoholic, you're a drug addict. That's not how things should go. She was telling her life story, and the reason that we got into that is to let you know what her mindset is at that point in time. Because her past is all the prologue leading up to this date, leading up to June the 15th of 2013. The actions that she took before informed how she acted on this particular night. As you've heard over and over again, Miss Madonna has made a continued pattern in her life of making the wrong call. The split-second call, making the wrong choice. And that's what she did on June the 15th. It wasn't anything malicious on her. It wasn't anything premeditated on her part. It was because that's how she has always been. When we talk about Miss Madonna and we talk about the family dynamic between her and Jose Perez, you didn't hear anyone say Miss Madonna was evil either. You never heard anyone say Miss Madonna was aggressive or angry or had a fight a day in her life. Her and Jose are on the same exact plane. She never thought that Jose was going to do what he did, and she never thought that she would have to do what she had to do. But that's what happened. I'm going to talk to you some about the physical evidence in the case. I want you to think back when we were talking to Miss Madonna on the stand on direct. First, we tell you a lot about her life, like I said. And the forest where she came from, she wouldn't change any of that. She can't change any of that at this point, but that's who she is. And when the state got her, and when the state has the opportunity to tear her up, they're not talking about the evidence. They're talking about these letters that she's writing. They're talking about talking to Paul. They're not talking about what happened to Jose Perez that day, because they know that the evidence fits her story directly. I'm going to first talk about the injuries that Jose Perez sustained. And I'm going to show you why that they match up directly with what Joanna Madonna said happened that night and what transpired on the Old Bayleaf Road. All right. First, we're talking about sharp force injury A, which is on the left jawline to the left cheek, 1.5 inches deep, left to right, front to back. And I'm going to show you the picture. I'll click on it. I know they're grisly, but I just want to refresh your recollection about these injuries. So looking on the dummy here, left jawline, left to right, back to front. So the left jawline, left to right, back to front, right about there on our mannequin here. That's sharp force injury A. Now sharp force injury B is the thing that we've never really figured out what it is. We don't know if it was going in or out, or it's a bony fragment, or it may have been the dentures, but it was 0.5 inches deep. It may represent a stab wound. We talked a lot about it may be a bullet. No one's exactly clear about what it is, but this is sharp force injury B. And that is right by his mouth here. And obviously, it's not to scale. Sharp force injury C, right upper neck, 2.5 inches deep. We're going right to left, back to front. And this was the other very deep gash on the other side. So right to left, back to front, 2.5 inches deep. And this was one of the more serious injuries that Jose Perez sustained. We're going to put that there on his right upper neck. That being injury C. Then we have sharp force injuries D and sharp force injuries E, which are both superficial, very shallow, on the same side as sharp force injury C, right by his ear. So we have D there and E here. We have sharp force injury H, which is a regular shaped wound on the arm. 1.5 to 3/4 front to back. I believe the state is saying, well, maybe this is a gunshot wound, but I think you remember the medical examiner saying, well, it's not that deep. We don't know. One thing we know for sure is that Jose was shot. We know this bullet was never tested, but we have a bloody bullet that is deformed. Jose was shot at some point, and all of that information is coming from Ms. Madonna. So we have this diamond-shaped wound here. Then sharp force injury I. This is the one that was on Mr. Perez's shoulder blade that ends up breaking his clavicle. Left shoulder, back to front, slightly left to right. On the left shoulder here, breaking Jose Perez's collarbone. Then we have sharp force injury J to the chest area. 2.5 inches deep, left chest going right to left. So let's put that right back there. Now we got to turn to the back, and I think these are super important because what I'm trying to show you is the only way that these injuries could have been sustained is the exact way that Ms. Madonna says that altercation occurred. And we're looking at sharp force injury K. It's to the back here. And this will be his lower right-hand side here. Sharp force injury K. Then we have superficial wound, less than 1/16 of an inch, sharp force injury L. And this is a little bit off of his midline here on his back. Then we have sharp force injury M, 2 inches deep, right on his midline here to the right-hand side, right to left. We have sharp force injury N, a little bit higher there on his upper back, but still on his back here. And then sharp force injury O, which is 0.5 inches deep. And then finally we have the injury to Jose Perez's hand, the bruising that is on his right hand there. All right, now that we've laid all of Mr. Perez's injuries out, Let's look at some of Miss Madonna's injuries. I'm not going to mark these on the dummy. The injuries are just for Jose Perez. We have a bruise on her left upper thigh near her knee. We have these scratches that you can see here. This is on her left lower arm, and then these scratches on her our upper left arm. We have these injuries here to her chest, and you remember there were red bruising in that area. And then it's a faint scratch here, but you can see the scratch that the Emmy had talked about when the agent had talked about when she came in and took the pictures of her. A faint scratch there. Let's piece this all together. Okay, at this point in time, this is going to be Joanna Madonna for a second. I'm going to be Jose Perez. They get out of the car on Old Bay Leaf Road. She says Jose comes up and hits her with a forearm, hits her with a punch right in the chest here where you see her bruising. She falls to the ground, and I knew his arm was going to come off. And he gets on top of her. And is holding her down with his right hand, fully mounted on her, 198 pounds, 5'9", laying on top of Joanna Madonna with his right elbow right in her chest, cutting off her breath, making her feel like she couldn't breathe, like she was drowning. Now, that was the injuries that she went through at that point in time. And you also remember he's guided her with his right forearm right across her chest, cutting off her breath, and he gets bruising on his right hand because that's what he's holding her down with. Now, I've got to turn this around and show you how these injuries got to Mr. Jose Perez. I'm now Joanna Madonna. The only way these injuries happen, he is fully mounted on top of her. She is cutting, she is slashing. This is the only way she can get him. The only way that she can get to his back like that is to swing around like she's giving him a hug. But she's just swinging and slashing, able to get his neck on both sides, able to come around with a backhand and stab him on the other side. This is the only way this happens. And the only way that these injuries can happen at the same time as these is directly what her story says. When she feels like she can get up, when she feels like she can compose herself, she pushes herself from under him. And that's where he laid. That's where he ended up. That's why she has the blood on her shirt. And that is the only way those wounds can happen. Now, yeah, he's heavy, top heavy. One last thing before we put him up. If Joanna Madonna were just to come up on Jose Perez and take advantage of her physical strength and size, wouldn't she just go like this? Or wouldn't she just go like this? Wouldn't all these wounds be in the same place? Why are these wounds on his back? We know the struggle just happened in that one spot. The only way that these wounds make sense is because Joanna is telling you the truth. That's exactly how it happened. I also pieced together the other physical evidence that Joanna Madonna got on the stand and told you, and everything makes sense. Joanna Madonna came back home after visiting her nephew in South Carolina. goes to the Sheetz gas station, gets the Mountain Dew. The Mountain Dew cup that you later see excuse me, I guess the Sheetz cup that we see that has been admitted as evidence. And I'll get to that in 1 second. They went and drove to the Sheetz. She still is not talking to him about everything. She goes in, pays for his Mountain Dew, and then they go to the Family Dollar or Dollar Tree or whatever. She goes in, makes some purchases, and at that point in time, because Jose's meticulous nature about making sure the car is clean, probably sees that gun and that knife in the car at that point in time. Then they drive, and we're not sitting here telling you we know exactly where they drove to or exactly where they were at. We just know, we know for sure that Jose was shot. We know for sure that his bullet was never tested for anything, and we know for sure that it's still sitting in the car, a day later, 2 days later at this point, depending on when the cops came and when the CCBI came out. And it happened here. Now, once this occurs, they start driving, saying, I'm gonna take you to the hospital. She doesn't have her phone, and she doesn't know if Jose has his phone. She's taking him to the hospital. She made a mistake in not stopping at the first fire station, police department, or gas station she could, but she was taking the same trip that she had taken Jose on and many a times, going to the Durham VA. She's taking the road that we continue to hear about, the Durham Highway here. When Jose says he's having another heart attack or having another incident, again, she shouldn't believe him. She shouldn't believe him at this point. He had already pulled out a gun and tried to shoot her dead. But she still turns into that place, gets out of the car, and then that's where the incident happened. That's when the stabbing happened. We've already covered this. Joanna Madonna is the only person that says, this gun was used. This gun is there because they never found the gun. They never tested this bullet. Why would Joanna Madonna give that piece of information unless it's absolutely true? And that's what she did. And we know one thing for sure. Jose had gunshot residue on his palm. Now, we've heard a lot about Jose's ability to use his hands, so we don't know if he used his left hand and was unable to fire a good shot, or he takes a standard shooting position, grabs with his right hand, puts his left hand like that. But one thing that we know for sure, Jose Perez has gunshot residue on his hands. And that didn't come from him wiping a wound. That didn't come from him touching anything else. That came from him shooting a gun. He shot the gun at Joanna Madonna out there where the square is at the possible first event. If Joanna Madonna was the one that is supposed to be planning and preparing and premeditating and got this gun to kill Jose Perez, and she has this advantage and he doesn't know anything about it, why not just shoot him dead? We have a 5-shot revolver. We're missing those 5 bullets from the bullet box that we get to later on. Why not just shoot him dead out there at this location that we don't know where it's at? Why not just shoot him there? Why leave the gun out there? Why put these bullets up and think that you're going to take it back to your nephew at some other point in time? If Joanna Madonna had intended to kill Jose with that gun, she could have done it right then and right there with that gun. And then once Jose fires this shot at her and he tries to pull the gun and tries to shoot himself as he had threatened her all this time saying, if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself, she still stops him. And she didn't care about him and she wanted him dead and that's what he's doing, then let him do it. But she still cared about him. More than that, she's putting the onus, the blame again once on her own shoulders. Saying, well, I kind of thought that this may happen. I kind of thought that once I told him that this is the end and you've got to leave, that he may kill himself. She still tries to stop him. She still feels guilty about it. She puts him back in the car. You had heard from Jose Perez's, I believe it was his daughter, saying that Jose Perez never wore a seatbelt. That fits the evidence. Because then Joanna Madonna says, I buckled him in. I put him in. Once I saw that he was shot, he's bleeding, he had been shot in the face, I buckled him in. And you see all this blood on the seatbelt here. That's where the majority of the blood is in that car. If she intended to kill him and had already shot him once, why are you putting him back in the car to take him anyplace else? It's because I'm going to keep on saying it to you over and over and over again. Because what she said is what happened. And the physical evidence is right here looking at you. The state's own evidence supports her story. And again, with the dentures, we see these shattered dentures here. We see this bullet here. This bullet doesn't get deformed to get blood on it from nowhere. Obviously, the ME is not able to nail down anything, but we know these dentures get shattered. I don't see this straight knife wound that's supposed to be in breaking these dentures. You see them shattered into multiple pieces here. Jose, in his attempt to kill himself and fighting over the gun with Miss Madonna, shot himself in the mouth. He still has his top set of dentures. He's talking to her. He's cussing her out. He's saying that he's going to go get Michelle. Now, did Miss Madonna ever have any indications that he would go to such an extreme? Absolutely not. If Joanna Madonna was as malicious, as vindictive as the state makes her out to be, we would have been calling him every name in the book. Oh, he was always abusive. He was always beating me. I never told the cops. He was always this way. I knew this was going to happen eventually. But that's not the case. Neither one of them saw this coming. When Miss Madonna said, I need to separate, she didn't see this coming. But she still buckled him in. She still cared for him, even though he had tried to kill her. Again, just going back to the map, they're taking him to the VA hospital. As you can see clearly, it's right on the way, supporting her story. We stop at Old Bayleaf Road, where the last incident happens. It happens there. She leaves. She goes home. But she was on the way to the VA hospital in Durham. First-degree murder, definition is you have to have premeditation and deliberation and an actual malice in your heart. What does malice mean? Malice means not only hatred, ill will, or spite, as is ordinarily understood, but it also means a condition of the mind that prompts a person to intentionally take a life of another. I believe this is the easiest charge to straight up dismiss in your minds, because they haven't shown one iota of evidence that Joanna Madonna prepared to do this, was planning to do this, and was intending to do this. Nothing whatsoever. Everything that she had done, everything she had said, all those text messages and emails that she sent are to the contrary of premeditation and deliberation. They go entirely against it. You're also being, second-degree murder is also being submitted to you. Now, second-degree murder is the same as first-degree murder. You still have to have that malice. You still have to have that ill will. You still have to have that intent that Miss Madonna wanted to kill Jose Perez dead on that day. That is still not here. Malice is nowhere here. Malice is not taking your husband and has an injury to himself after he tried to kill himself and still taking him to the hospital. That was her being burdened with the guilt of this man, her husband of almost 4 or 5 years at that point, trying to take his own life. So again, with second-degree murder, we don't have any malice whatsoever. What we have here is a case of self-defense. She didn't know that was going to happen. She didn't know she was going to have to react that way, but she did. When she is sitting there, Jose being on top of her and strangling her and choking the life out of her, and she can't even tell you how long it was. I'm sure that period of time felt like a lifetime to her. But when he's choking her and she's swinging that knife and just swinging it wildly and getting his neck and getting the backhand and getting around him, that's what she had to do. She thought she was going to die, and she thought she had to kill Jose Perez to stop that from happening. Also, another charge that is being submitted to you is voluntary manslaughter. That is an unlawful killing without malice, premeditation, or deliberation. And it's not committed with malice if you're thinking that Miss Madonna, her passions got inflamed and something went horribly wrong and she killed Jose Perez. And that could also be excessive force. Now, I would argue to you that Miss Madonna laying down at that point in time and never seen her husband act this way, and he's choking her with his forearm and she's scratching and clawing and eventually grabs his knife and starts stabbing him. She had to defend herself. But if your frame of mind is, well, she could have gotten away, even though I would submit to you she couldn't, but she could have gotten away and she didn't have to kill him, then that could be excessive force. And that's when you will have to, I guess, analyze for yourself and determine if Joanna Madonna used excessive force to defend herself from Jose Perez. That's your choice to make, but I'm telling you, and I've shown you, that what she did at that point in time is what she had to do. We're going to back up a little bit and talk about some of the outside aspects of this case. I think contention is the state focused on those outside aspects. They weren't asking Ms. Madonna about the actual crime. They weren't asking her about all this money she was supposed to have. They're asking her about these letters that she's sending and this Paul dude and letters she's writing to the priest and her abortions, which have absolutely nothing to do with this case whatsoever. They just want you to think that Joanna Madonna is a bad person. And if you think that she cheated, and I think she was on her way to cheating, that's a bad act. You shouldn't do that. You wait and get divorced and move on. But that has nothing to do whatsoever with whether or not Miss Madonna committed a first-degree premeditated murder. They are just muddying the water here. She's been 2 years removed from this relationship, and even further than that, how is one supposed to react when your husband tries to kill you? Like, what is the proper reaction? Until you've been through it, we don't know. But these letters and her past have absolutely nothing. But that was what the state was focusing on all this time. And you heard from Ms. Madonna yourself. You listened to her for about 3 or 4 hours. And there may be some things that she said or her reactions that she had or just her general demeanor that make you think, I don't know if I like her as a person. She might be a little bit too argumentative. She might be rambling too much. That's fine. You can think that. But none of that goes to whether or not she committed a premeditated first-degree murder with malice in her heart. The evidence, which we should be focusing on here, not about abortions, not about adoption, not about drug use, not about being an alcoholic. What we should be focusing on, we're not talking about whatsoever, because everything goes to Miss Madonna's case. Miss Madonna, we talked a lot about money and support and things like that, had her own money. Remember back when she said she ended up moving from New York down to North Carolina. When they moved from New York, that family home had been paid for a long time ago. She came up down to North Carolina selling that house for a little over $500,000. She had her own money before she even met Jose. She comes down here and buys a house free and clear. Buys a $300,000 house with her money from the estate that was going to be coming to her from her own father, and comes down here with Chuck Pritchard. She pays this money and she owns that house outright. And even further, once they end up selling that home, that marital home, she said sold it for $220,000. Once Jose is in the picture, she takes another step and goes ahead and pays the rent on the new house for a full year. And Jose is not paying rent at this point, so who is taking advantage of who? They had a relationship. They were together. They're supposed to support each other. And that's what she did. And for the first couple of years here, we hear about her working constantly throughout this time. There was no money to be gotten from Jose. We even hear about once Jose married Miss Madonna and Jose added her kids as his dependents, that's when his money goes up. His money jumps from $2,000 to $4,400 due to her being married to him and him taking them on. So the benefits are going both ways here. Her children benefited Jose, and they had a mutually beneficial relationship. And she said at that point in time, there was love. There was love here. You've seen the pictures. There was love. We talked about Jose's lies a lot, and just want you to know, we're not here to disparage Jose. Even Miss Madonna wouldn't get up there and say a bunch of bad stuff about him because that's not who he was. She never anticipated that this was going to happen. But him dying of cancer, saying he's dying of cancer and then not dying of cancer, that being completely untrue. Him having a trust fund, him having a huge inheritance, him planning to move them all to New York. This is not just to say that he was untruthful at times. He even told his own doctor, his own psychiatrist, that the problems with him lying were causing problems in their relationship. This is more to show that Miss Madonna knew all this in advance. She knew what kind of dude he was, and she married him anyway. She knew what kind of lies he was telling, and she stayed with him anyway. She knew all this was going on for multiple years, that they were together before they got married, while they were married, and even after they got married. She's still calling him an assistant district attorney because that's what she thought. That's what he had told her. So with all this ammunition, multiple ways to just leave him a long time ago, what is the point of her staying? Besides that, she was still in love with this guy. The cheating and alcohol use, I'll submit to you, Miss Madonna really didn't have any proof. She had that email, that Facebook message that you heard her read in Spanish, and that was I guess the bright line test for her that something is really going on, and she had always suspected that. We don't have the hard evidence that else happened, but she just has her own opinion about what was going on. And that is what changed her mindset about this whole relationship. At that point in time, when she's thinking that he's cheating, when he's thinking he's falling off the wagon, when he's thrown away all these years of sobriety, that's when her opinion switches up. And that's when she makes a determination that this is not the guy for me anymore. That was the final straw. It wasn't the final straw to separate her from that relationship. Not just to show you that Jose was lying about stuff, but just where her mindset was. We talked some about Jose's health. You heard Jose's friend even say that Joanna Madonna made Jose better. She got him eating right, she had him working out, had him losing weight, and even the doctor say, well, once she got involved, his health increased. If Miss Madonna wanted Jose dead, why is she doing all this stuff to save his life? If Miss Madonna wanted Jose dead, why is she trying to get the troubleshooter involved to get him help, to get him additional help from the VA? If Miss Madonna didn't love him, why is she doing all this? And, excuse me. Another point, we even heard Jose's own daughter say, well, I didn't even know he had all these health problems until I came to court. Jose's health looks terrible on paper, but out in the world, you've seen the pictures, you've seen his grip, you've seen him cutting down trees. He was fine out in the world. On paper, he looks bad. But it's something that his own daughter didn't even know the extent of his health injuries, his health situation. Jose was fine. He was able to get around. He's not this feeble invalid that the state wants to make him out to be. And if he was, then Miss Madonna could have just let him go. She could have just given him some time, and Mother Nature would have taken Jose eventually, if that's what she wanted to do. But that's not the case. She made him better. She had him working out just like she had done with her own father who was living in the home. That's not the case. Joanna Madonna never wanted Jose dead. She saved his life on multiple occasions. You remember towards February of 2012 and into 2013, he was in passed out with a diabetic issue that his own doctor, Dr. Fauci, said that's a bad situation for him to be in. If this relationship was this bad and Joanna Madonna had been premeditating to kill him, she could have just walked out of the room and left him there, or not called 911 and not performed CPR on him, but that's what she did. She tried to save his life on multiple occasions. Jose's health, we've heard about him driving and texting and yard work and chores. Again, that's just a show. Jose's, if you're reading his medical report, he sounds bad on paper, but he was up, he was walking around, he was getting around. We see this picture here of him by himself in Puerto Rico, navigating the stairs. This right arm that is supposed to be so old and decrepit is gripping that stairwell just fine. And then we see this picture here from Schoolhouse Street, where he's got a saw blade that you need both hands to use, and he's cutting the limbs off this tree and working up a sweat on his shirt. This is after he's on Schoolhouse Street. Dr. Falgey's testimony is in the past. Dr. Falgey said Joanna had made him better, and this is what he was doing. This is what he was able to do. He's not an old, decrepit invalid that is not able to pin Joanna Madonna down and choke the life out of her. He was able to do this. Even more so, Joanna is the one that put Jose through a financial rehab. We hear about when they're moving into these houses, they're unable to rent. After Jose had moved in and was living rent-free, she's the one that paid the rent for that entire first year on that new place, and then started building up his credit. She would tell you when she took the money from the sale of the house with Chuck, she ended up paying off cars and paying off bills for Jose, so together they can afford to get a new house because she had gone default on her student loans, and together they were trying to build up this credit. And it took them 2 years to do it. But where is all this money that the state is supposed to be saying that Joanna Madonna was gouging Jose Perez out of? It just doesn't exist. They can talk about it all they want, but you've heard the detectives and all the officers here say, well, we pulled his whole credit history, we pulled all his bank records, we were talking to the VA. Where are these benefits? Where are these wills? Where are these safe deposit boxes? None of this exists. They were married together and supporting each other. She told her friends in advance what was going to happen. She told her friends, you've seen all her text messages. That's something else that they detective pull. We have every single text message, every single phone call, all of their computer history from Joanna Madonna. She told her friends and texted her friends, and on the day of the event, she was calling and texting her daughters. And this is just to show there was nothing premeditated about any kind of murder. She was calling and telling them, hey, on this date, on this day, when I get home, I'm going to ask Jose to leave. And why is this day so important to her? You see, she's kind of fixated with dates. That's because Father's Day was the next day. It's kind of like when people wait till New Year's and then go get a gym membership. She was fixated on that day. On this day, I'm going to do it. I'm going to get off my butt and go work out. Well, on this day, she was going to do it. I don't want to go through another Father's Day with Jose Perez being in my life. I've already got my father here, and he's living with us. This needs to be done. This is my deadline to do it. And that's why it was important on that day. And that shows there was no premeditation. There was no deliberation. There was no malice further to do this. This was just the day that she had set in her head that finally, and once and for all, I'm going to ask Jose to leave. I'm tired of going back and forth. I'm tired of waiting. I've got myself in a position. I'm calling my friends saying, hey, even after this, financially, I'm going to be all right. We might have to downsize the house, but I'm working. I'm selling my jewelry. My kids are working. We will be fine. But on this day, on this Father's Day, Jose needs to be gone. He needs to be out of the house. The visit with nephew and the email correspondence, you heard that from Michelle Parrish, who is William Lopez's mom. You heard that then, and we have the Facebook messages in the discovery, in the exhibits. She planned to go down to Spartanburg, South Carolina in May. And they're like, no, it's not going to work for us. We're both working. You can't come down here that day. If you want to believe the state's theory, then if she would have gone down there in May, she would have came back and murdered Jose. It didn't work out that way because that was not the plan. It wasn't like she was waiting for this time to go down there and get the gun and get the knife. She had planned to go down there way before that. And you can see from the text messages and the Facebook status updates and things like that, she was even planning to go back after this happened. She's planning to go back on the way home, saying, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to take my nephew out and I'm going to spoil him. Her intent was to go home and ask Jose to leave. She had absolutely no idea that she was going to be coming back with that gun. Lord knows I wish she hadn't. She wishes she hadn't. But when she went down there and they start talking about guns and she's talking about the break-ins in her house and in her neighborhood, that's when it pops up. That's when William hands her the gun and the knife. She says, I'm going to bring this gun and this knife back to you in a couple of weeks. That's what her mindset was. Is she going to be bringing back a gun and a knife that she's planning to kill her husband with? Absolutely not, because that's not what's in her head. What's in her head was, I'm going to need this for protection because pretty soon it's going to be a house full of females, just us. And we have these breaking and enterings. That's why she was nervous. She had been married to this man for years. She had been telling her daughter, and both of her daughters and her friends, and even Chad, on the way down there, that when I get home tonight, I want you guys to be out of the house. Was she planning on killing him in the house? Absolutely not. That wasn't going into her head. What was going into her head is, I don't want you to hear us fussing and fighting because this thing may blow up. He's going to be upset because I'm putting my foot down. That's why I'm asking them to leave the house. And when they did not leave the house, that's when they took their trip. She also had a fear of the home. And the state is going to contend, well, these crimes never happened. She thought they happened. She said Jose had told her that was what was going on. And then you even heard from Detective Gay himself, there were break-ins. They were a little bit farther from the house than she thought, but there was a break-in of a car and there was a break-in of a building there. Aren't these recent break-ins scary enough where she needs to be fearful of herself? It's been a long time since she's lived by herself, and she has 3 young, beautiful girls there and her elderly father. It was going to be them on their own. That's what she needed the protection for. She didn't go down there and buy this gun. She didn't go down there and ask for this gun. It was given to her. Unfortunately, it was given to her. And if she's planning to just stab her husband to death, I'm pretty sure there are knives in the house that she can use. If that's what her intent was. Like I said, making plans to go back and had William not given her the gun, she would have just been coming back home without it. She was reacting to this whole thing like it was a high school breakup. You see the things that she did. She just takes all of his stuff and throws it in the trash. She takes all of his memorabilia and throws it in the trash. She goes on and deletes his Facebook account. That's something a teenager does. That's something from a breakup. That's nothing from a murder. If you have this malice and have this intent, regardless of whether it's premeditated or not, she doesn't want to be caught for this second-degree murder. So she's not going to go to these kind of extents to get that done. She just takes his stuff and throws it in the trash. And she's throwing it in the trash on Saturday night to Sunday morning, and just leaves it there. If she has this malice and she has this depraved heart and she has this idea that she has murdered her husband and needs to get away with it, she had ample opportunity to get rid of this evidence. And she didn't, because that's not where her head was at. Look at her actions afterwards. She's telling her friends that Jose left. She's Googling separation and protective order. She's telling the girls to put lock on the doors. She's even calling Jose's own friend, who she had called for help before about Jose, and tells him, hey, we need locks on the doors. And we've talked a lot about her saying about Jose going to Florida. We know that's not the case. And I think Joanna Madonna, in her wishing that was the case, wishing he wasn't dead, started trying to speak that into existence, telling everyone about it, telling everyone he went to Florida. That's not the case. She wishes that happened, but that wasn't the case. But it has nothing to do with whether she planned to kill him. And that if she had done this, either planned to kill him or committed this maliciously, she still would have taken better cleanup, better protective measures, better way to make sure that this crime never comes back to her if she was acting with this malice. Now, Joanna even said, I thought he may be alive. And I know it sounds, especially looking at the pictures that you just saw, sounds bizarre. It sounds bizarre. Like, how can you think this guy's still alive? But remember what Detective Garvey and, Deputy Garvey and Deputy Mackey said. When they came out there, they just saw these scratches on him. And remember, he was laying just like I showed you, laying face down in the grass, nothing on his back whatsoever because he fell down. Everything happened like I told you. And remember from Agent Louder, we're talking about the wound on one side of his neck, but she never even saw the one on the other side. So that is what Joanna Madonna is seeing. And furthermore, the medical examiner from the state's evidence said, oh, hey, he could have lived for another hour. He could have been out there living for another hour. Why in the world does Joanna Madonna go and take that man's shoes off and chuck them into the woods unless she really thought that he may get up and come after me? It doesn't make any sense otherwise, because that's still where her head was at. She didn't want him to get up and follow her. No one else came and tampered with his body. No one else came and took Mr. Perez's shoes off. She came before she left, or after she said she had got up, she runs back, takes the shoes off and chucks them into the woods, takes his knife and chucks them in the other direction. If she had planned to murder Jose, if she had had this malicious intent in her heart, why is she leaving the murder weapon out there? It doesn't make any sense for her to do it that way. If this was her plan, if this was her intent, you would get rid of evidence. You don't just leave it right there on the scene for anybody to find it. If she wanted to murder Jose, and as the state was trying to get after Miss Madonna, leave him where no one can find him, he's sitting there right on the side of the road. And we've heard about the officers going out there at night and spraying the phenolphthalein around and trying to light up the forest to see where else this happened. It didn't happen anywhere else. It happened right there, exactly as Joanna Madonna said. So she's taking his shoes off, she's throwing them in there, she's taking his knife, she's leaving all the evidence there, and just like she had taken that gun and just thrown it in beside where the initial event happened, everything that Miss Madonna is telling you is the truth. It happened exactly that way. She just made some stupid mistakes. She took some stupid actions to lie to people. She took some stupid actions to lie to people, but she didn't take any action to kind of cover anything up. She's just lying. She's trying to make sure, she's wishing and hoping and praying that Jose was going to be all right after that fight and he was just going to go to Florida. Obviously, that's not the case. I think it's incumbent upon us to talk just a little bit about Chad Richardson. Now, I mostly want to talk about how the months before he was in this position of trust and authority over Miss Madonna. And she's telling him then that this marriage wasn't what it was supposed to be and that she was separating. That just goes to show that her mindset this entire time towards the end of her marriage was to separate. It wasn't to murder Jose Perez. Chad Richardson is not a prize. He's not worth murdering your husband over. They have been sending these text messages for about a week. And if there had been anything like that before, I'm sure the state would have sat here and read those to you too. They are sending these text messages, these corny, lovey-dovey text messages, because that was the beginning. That was the beginning, and is it inappropriate for Miss Madonna to be sending these text messages? Absolutely. Is it absolutely inappropriate for Mr. Richardson as her therapist and then take advantage of that and try to move it into a physical relationship? Absolutely. But she had told Chad beforehand that she was going to separate from Jose, and she had told people about their think everyone has problems with sex and money and I guess trust in their marriage. Those are normal problems to have. There's nothing special about that. Just like there's nothing special about Chad that Joanna Madonna is going to go murder her husband and then jump right into a relationship with Chad. He doesn't want her, definitely. And she didn't want that either. and she did not intend for this to happen, is it absolutely, I guess, bad form, for lack of a better term, to go and visit with Chad the night after this happened? Yes. It shouldn't happen that way. But again, getting inside Joanna Madonna's head as best we can, I think that just goes further to show that what she had gone through, she didn't think anything had happened. She thought Jose was going to be okay. You've heard her about going to the pool that day. You heard about her looking for restraining orders and things like that day. She's looking up cheesecake recipes to make for her dad that day. She just continued on as a normal day, hoping and praying that that Jose was going to be fine. And again, she had told him in advance, every time I talk to Jose about leaving, that's when he's threatening suicide. Every single text message that she sent shows there's no premeditation. There's no deliberation. The scene itself shows there's no premeditation. There's no deliberation. I know Detective Weaver said it's 300 yards off, but no one else says that on Old Bailey from Highway 98. It's just a little bit in. You can see pictures. He's right there on the side of the road. Left the knife, left him right by the side of the road. And then the cleanup itself. We've seen the pictures of the so-called cleanup. When the officers are coming there the next day, they readily see blood on the car, and they readily see the evidence inside the car. If there was a cleanup, if there was malicious intent, if this is what she had planned to do and wanted to cover up doing it, she had ample time to do it. And you heard from the first witness in this case, the gentleman that was walking his dog, there's a dump 2 miles up the road. If that's what Miss Madonna wanted to do and wanted to murder her husband and dump him somewhere and then take his belongings and dump them somewhere, she had ample opportunity to do it. But she's going to meetings, she's visiting Chad, she's going to church, she's going to the pool, showing you where her mind state was at, showing you what she thought was going on. And that's just hitting the same points I just made. To have ample opportunity to take any of these actions to conceal the crime, and she took none of them. The state has to prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Joanna Madonna did not act in self-defense. And we've seen the physical evidence, we've seen this bullet, we've seen the bloody seatbelt. And we see right here on State's Exhibit 70, we see that sheets cut. The sheets cut that she just threw in there with all the other stuff. These little pieces, these little details of that day, that's telling you she's telling the truth. That gone the sheets, and once he had shot himself, he puts his hand in the Mountain Dew and wipes it on his face. And you see the bug marks on his face, the bugs coming to bite him. And we see this Zap stick or whatever just thrown in the trash that was later contaminated by being placed in the same bag. She's giving you details. She's telling you about this gun. She's telling you about the sheet strip that is all corroborated by the physical evidence. The state wants you to convict Miss Madonna because she was texting Chad and being flirty with Chad. The state wants you to convict Miss Madonna and send her to prison for the rest of her life because she was flirting and that she was looking for Paul or sending Paul messages after the fact. But what did the state talk about during their case that proves any kind of motive, that proves that intent? The state has to prove to you, first of all, that Miss Madonna did not act in self-defense. And they have not carried their burden. Because they can't even say anything about what happened that day because it all makes sense. Remember what she was telling you. Remember the reenactment with the dummy there. The only way those stab wounds can happen. Again, where are these benefits? Where are these wills? Where are these safe deposit boxes? Where is all this money? Where's all this money coming out of Jose's bank account and going into Joanna Madonna's? They can talk about that all they want. They can ask her about that all they want. But where's the proof of that? There is none, because that's not the case. That is not the case. Like Ms. Madonna said on the stand, they were living month to month, just like a lot of Americans. They're living month to month. There was no money to be gotten. Sure, as dependents of Jose, they're entitled to college, a little bit of college stipends and a little bit of insurance, but there is no huge windfall that is coming in because of the death of Jose Perez. Joanna Madonna would even say, outside of, I guess, the lack of relationship, everything was better with Jose Perez. She stood nothing to gain. She's losing income from the death of Jose Perez. This thing has turned her life upside down and ruined the lives of her children as well. She had nothing to gain from the death of Jose Perez. And then when we're looking at these internet searches, if you remember, these are on one date. This one date about benefits. If this was her plan and this is the scheme she's concocting, she would need more than one time to look at this. She clicked on the benefits and then clicked on a couple of links from that. And these are all happening within a couple of minutes. And when they're talking about these searches for the gun, we don't even know when that was. It could have been back in 2009. And when we're talking about this taser thing, that was back in April of her watching, learning about the problems at her school and being interested in a taser. But this wasn't in June. This wasn't when everything was ramping up and she's planning to kill Jose Perez. These are all back in the past, happening on one date each. I'm sure if any of us were to have someone go in and pry on the internet searches, people will be shocked and surprised at some of the things we search for on a day-to-day basis. And it's no different from Ms. Madonna. But they went through each and everything meticulously and found this one instance of her looking at benefits. Found this one instance, we don't know when, of her looking for a gun. And found these one instance of a taser. That's not a plan. And you know, this can, the IT person, I'm able to pull all this deleted stuff up. There was no attempt to hide that on her part. And she would even say, yeah, I deleted his Facebook account. I took my pictures off his side of his nightstand and threw them in the trash. Because I thought I was going through a breakup. I know we had that fight. I know we had that blow up. But in no way did I intend to kill Jose Perez. Detective Weaver even said on the stand, either she wanted someone to find the body or was in a hurry. If you want someone to find the body, then you're not acting maliciously, because no one wants to be caught for a murder. You're not being premeditated. You're not even being a second-degree murderer because you want somebody to find it. 2, obviously Ms. Madonna wasn't in a hurry. She had all this time to fix the problem if that's what she intended to do. And Detective Weaver even said herself, some of the things that she did just doesn't make sense. If she had intended to kill Jose Perez and she wasn't acting in self-defense, why is she doing this? Why is she asking about the locks on the doors? Why is she Googling separation? Why did she not get rid of the stuff? Because it doesn't make sense with a murder, but it makes perfect sense with you defending yourself and then finding out that you had killed your husband and defending yourself, and then being in a state of mind that she has always done. She'd done with her daughter Rachel, and she even admitted that she had done with her own attorneys. She makes bad choices. But she never had a choice in this matter. When she was laying down on the ground being strangled by Jose Perez, she didn't have a choice. When she saw her arm bleeding and saw that knife sitting there, she didn't have a choice. She just picked up the knife, and she can't even tell you how many times she swung or how she swung. She said she swung until it got off. She didn't have a choice. And that's why the detective said it doesn't make sense. Because this ain't the kind of thing that it makes sense for a murderer to do. Every single text message, every single phone call, and every piece of evidence goes along with Joanna Madonna's story that she told you. And she made some very poor choices that night, but her intent was to separate. If the state wants you to believe that Joanna Madonna intended to kill her husband, they're asking for a Gone Girl level of planning, of meticulousness, of evil in her heart to do that. That's not what Joanna Madonna had. She had to defend herself. She is not guilty of first-degree murder. She is not guilty of second-degree murder. She is not guilty of voluntary manslaughter. If you think that she could have escaped without having to murder Jose, then maybe you can find her guilty of that. But the absolute fact is, and all the evidence points towards, Miss Madonna is not guilty. She had to defend herself. We've laid everything out for you, and that's the evidence right there. It went down exactly the way she told you it did. All those other facts are irrelevant. All those letters, all those texts, all those calls, Chad, is irrelevant. Did Miss Madonna plan to kill Jose Perez? Did she act with malice when she had to kill Jose Perez? The answer is no. And you have to find her not guilty. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take our morning recess at this point. During our morning recess period, it is your duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. It's your duty not to talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. It's your further duty not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you, to say anything in your presence about this case. If anyone communicates with you at all in any way, let the sheriff know when you come in. Don't do any individual research or investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay away from your smartphones. You haven't heard the state. You haven't heard me. Do not form or express any opinion about this case during this time. Please leave your notes in your seats. And with that, while everyone else will remain seated, I'll excuse the 13th of you and ask that you return and assemble in the jury room at 11 o'clock. That's your excuse.